I think for me, in terms of the Leon situation, it was really evident, not so much that it was so much the Spanish versus English, as much it was the rights of the people that are working there to be able to speak the language that they can speak. You know, it would have been different if it was that the person didn't speak the language, but to have a policy that says they cannot speak their language if somebody addresses them in that language, to me is totally inappropriate. You know, if the person didn't and they were English speaking only and a Spanish speaking individual went to the counter to ask for an ice cream, I mean, it would be a no-brainer, right? You can't answer in that language, that's fine. You answer and you speak the best you can to make the order go through. But to prevent someone who works in an establishment from speaking a language that they can speak, to me it's just not, it's not okay. It's not okay, and it should never be okay. We as individuals have got to get to the point where we start accepting people for who they are. It's just a basic human. I mean, I don't understand why there's so much reluctance. If we could just turn back time, to erase color, erase language, and just look at people for people, and not forget, how would we want to be treated? Many of us come from immigrant families. I mean, we would be hard pressed in Milwaukee to find someone who does not come from an immigrant family. We'd be very hard pressed. And if you could just go back and research in your own family, I think a lot of what we have today is this resentment, but we wouldn't have that if we truly understood where we as individuals come from. Whether that's Spanish or if they're German or Italian, anywhere that they've come from, we should be able to feel proud of who we are and where we come from. In order for us to have a strong community, we have to know who we are. It's necessary. We have to know who we are because we have to understand where we need to go. And we can't do that without looking back at who we are. And that's irrelevant of whether or not you're an immigrant or feel you're not an immigrant. We all started somewhere. We all have a family. We all have a history. And what I find today is because people don't understand who they are and where they come from, there's a lot of resentment for immigrants because they do. And with the Leon's thing too, going back to that for a moment, you know, it's good business. You know, I mean, so take culture, people, language totally out of it. If you can reach your customer in a way that is meaningful for them, you've created a customer for life. And that's basic business sense. And so from a business perspective, to have a policy that we know is discriminatory in its basis, despite what you hear, in terms of just basic good sense business, the policy doesn't make sense. If we look at immigration today, what we're talking about is really Spanish people, right? Typically coming from Mexico or Central America. Unfortunately, there is some ignorance out there about Puerto Ricans, but I will set the record straight that we are citizens since the United States has this commonwealth established with Puerto Rico. We are legal citizens. And so therefore we are not considered immigrants in the typical sense. In terms of looking at immigration even 50 years ago, if we look back 50 years ago, back then we weren't screaming and yelling about Spanish or English. We were talking about Eastern Europeans coming, and we had the same sentiments against them. We in America, I don't know exactly how we have this perspective, but we have this perspective that newcomers, no matter where they're coming from, in that next generation, those newcomers then become the target. If you look at history, in our history in particular and around immigration and with Mexico, there was a point in our time and in our history where we gave rights to Mexicans that we didn't give to African Americans. And so that's when I say we talk about our history, we need to understand our history. And we need to really start thinking about where we were so that we can understand where we're going, because history does repeat itself. I want to be careful as a community leader not to get involved in the flavor of the month, no pun for the Leon's thing, but when it's an issue, and it's irrelevant of who that issue affects. If it's affecting somebody's life, then it's important. And it should not matter whether they speak English, Spanish, Chinese, German, or whether they're black, white, or any other color in between. And so for me, I just have to keep grounding myself to say, look, if it's an issue, and it's irrelevant of whether or not it's popular. I mean, that's when you really start to see leaders come through. That's when, when you're a leader and it's not popular, but you're still a leader, you're not going to be popular as a leader. That's not what your motivation is. It's not to be popular, believe me. I probably am one of the least popular, being a Latina, managing a Latino organization, and the only Latina in a position leading a Latino organization, and let alone the oldest Latino organization, not only here in Milwaukee, but the state. Doesn't really make me always popular. But it shouldn't matter because I'm a woman that they feel I'm not qualified. It should be by my actions, my advocacy, my vision, and what I see that our community needs to have.